You know, sometimes life hands you a tragedy so unbelievable. It feels less like a chapter in your book and more like a terrible syndicated movie. And that's exactly what happened when the HOA president decided to torch my entire corn harvest. What she didn't know was that crop was actually insured for $2 million. Yeah, $2 million. But let me start at the beginning, because this isn't just a story about insurance money. It's about what happens when suburban entitlement butts heads with good, honest dirt. My name is Ethan Miller, and I live just outside of Oakhaven Heights, a place where the houses are brand new, the lawns are immaculate, and the spirit of community died the minute the bylaws were printed. My farm, the old Miller homestead, it was here long before the cul-de-sacs, long before the HOA ever drew their little red lines on the map. It was my father's legacy, acres of deep, rich Iowa soil, and that year, the corn was perfect. I mean truly golden, tall enough to hide a tractor just days from harvest. The kind of crop that makes a farmer feel like he's actually won the lottery, right? But then there was Carolyn Vance. Carolyn was the HOA president, a perfectly manicured tyrant who ran Oakhaven Heights like a 5-star resort concentration camp. Everything had to be beige, everything had to be clipped, and my towering, muddy, smelling like actual earth cornfield, which brushed right up against her perfect property line. Well, that was her personal Vietnam. She hated it. She hated the smell of the tassels. She hated the sound of the irrigation at dusk, and she especially hated my boots tracking honest dirt onto the asphalt when I drove out to town. It started like these things always do, with passive-aggressive paperwork. First, it was the formal letter on that heavy embossed paper, citing aesthetic violation, rural overgrowth adjacent to developed property. I laughed, crumpled it up, and tossed it into the burn barrel. But Carolyn doesn't take no for an answer. Next came the fines. $500 for visual disturbance, $750 for unsanctioned pest habitat, claiming my fields attracted squirrels to her azaleas. I kept paying them, thinking, my land predates your little kingdom, Carolyn. My rights are older than your vinyl siding. The tension, it became a part of the air I breathed. I'd see her standing by her flawless hedge line, arms crossed over her crisp white blazer, watching me through those huge, dark sunglasses like I was some kind of criminal, farming corn on purpose. A real live HOA Karen in her natural habitat. She'd always have that same tight-lipped look, a silent promise of war, and then the threats turned real. One Tuesday afternoon, I was pulling back into the drive and saw it. Spray paint, bright, toxic yellow slashed across the back of the barn door. Tear it down or we will. That wasn't an HOA letter. That was a felony. I filed a police report, but the officer just shrugged it off, calling it a neighborhood prank gone wrong, probably. Some teenagers, you know? But when Carolyn drove by later that week, slowing down just enough to give me a flash of that chilling, you're gonna lose smirk. I knew. I knew she had crossed a line, and I knew I had to brace myself. See, I'm a simple man, but I'm not stupid. Earlier that spring, after a hailstorm wiped out a small corner of the field, my old friend Stan, a guy who's seen it all, he told me, Ethan, you need to insure your future, son, not just for weather, but for the devil in your neighbor's heart. So I called the broker. It was expensive, but I took out the absolute highest level of comprehensive coverage: fire, flood, weather, and yes, specific coverage for malicious vandalism. It was just a safety net, a farmer being cautious. I never ever thought I'd actually have to use it. That fateful night, the sky was this incredible bruised purple and orange. Peaceful, you know? I was inside reading when my dog, Gus, started barking like a maniac at the back window. I looked out, and there it was, a flicker, a strange, hungry orange glow at the far edge of the property, right where the fence line meets the HOA's manicured green. I ran, boots pounding, heart slamming against my ribs, and the smell of smoke was already thick and oily in the dry August air. It started small, just a couple of rows, but the stalks were dry, ready for harvest, and the wind was cruel. It took hold like a living thing, roaring up and consuming everything in seconds. Neighbors started gathering, their faces lit by the inferno, silent and useless against the blaze. The volunteer fire guys showed up, sirens wailing. But by then, half the field, my entire year's work, my father's memory, it was just a wall of fire, licking at the night sky. I just stood there, watching the ash fall on my shoulders like black snow. I could feel the heat, the rage, the absolute gut punch of knowing this wasn't nature. This was personal. When the last flame sputtered out, the silence that fell was heavy, suffocating. Just blackened, ruined stalks where the gold used to be. I dropped to my knees, picking up a scorched ear of corn, its kernels nothing but cold, brittle cinders. In that moment, something inside me broke. Yeah, but it didn't shatter. It solidified. I knew then with absolute certainty that Carolyn had finally done it, and she thought that was the end of the story. She thought she had ruined me, run me off, finally sanitized her view. What she didn't realize, what she couldn't possibly fathom behind those perfect hedges and that superior attitude, was that her act of destruction had just triggered a security system far more complex than a fence or a fine. The fire she set in her petty suburban fury, it didn't burn down my future. It ignited my deliverance. The days that followed were pure wreckage, man. The air tasted like ash, the ground was a sea of black, and the reporters were circling like vultures, getting shots of me standing there looking exactly like what I was, a broken farmer in the middle of a bad joke. The sheriff's guys were saying, "Could have been a spark, Mr. Miller," but I just shook my head. The fire started right where Carolyn's yard ended. Too perfect, too deliberate, and while I was picking through the ruins, justice, or maybe just pure, unadulterated neighborhood gossip was already at work. The whispers started instantly. Carolyn and the farmer. Her car was seen late that night. She was on the phone screaming about the eyesore just hours before. The beautiful thing about an HOA is that everyone spies on everyone else. And the second Carolyn's perfect reputation had a crack, all those little grudges and observations came pouring out. She tried to play innocent, told the cops she was home watching TV, but her eyes kept darting away, and she stopped walking her damn poodle anywhere near the Miller homestead. Guilt is the worst kind of accelerant, I swear. But my focus wasn't on Carolyn, not yet. My focus was on rebuilding, and that's where the secret weapon came in. When the insurance adjusters showed up, 2 suits in a muddy field, they were initially polite but guarded. They took their samples, their aerial drone footage, and their measurements. I just answered their questions calmly, handed over the policy paperwork, and waited. The head adjuster, a kind old guy named Frank, reviewed the documents right there in the smoke-tinged dirt. He stopped, lifted his head, and gave me this look, a mix of awe and pity. "Mr. Miller," he said quietly, "I'm not sure you fully grasp what you did here. Most guys buy minimum liability. You bought full replacement value, including comprehensive malicious damage coverage." He paused, looking out over the destruction. "Every acre, every stalk, valued at its full potential market price, plus damages. Upon verification of arson, this policy is worth $2 million. Music swells slightly, dramatically, then cuts to a low, knowing beat. 2 million. I just nodded. I didn't smile, didn't cheer, didn't even say thank you. Because the victory wasn't the money. The victory was the look on Carolyn Vance's face if she knew what her hate had just financed. What she saw as my final ruin, I now saw as my unbelievable deliverance. The final reports came back solid. Gasoline residue, clear evidence of targeted arson. The sheriff's office got a faint but undeniable hit from a neighbor's security camera. A quick flash of an SUV matching Carolyn's model right by the fence line, minutes before the blaze. Her walls were collapsing and they weren't beige anymore. They were charred. A few days later, the wire transfer hit my account. $2,000. I didn't rebuild the cornfield. I wouldn't give Carolyn the satisfaction of seeing me toil again next to her domain. Instead, I quietly bought a vast, beautiful stretch of land 3 counties over, far from the sound of HOA regulations, where the air smells like clover and the only president is the one on the dollar bill. Carolyn, meanwhile, got her final piece of mail, not from the HOA but from the sheriff. Summons for questioning suspected felony arson. The cameras found her this time too, but not for a glowing community interview. They caught her shielding her face, reporters shouting, "Was it over the cornfield, Mrs. Vance? Was it worth $2 million?" She had wanted to erase my field. Instead, she had incinerated her entire life, her reputation, her power, her freedom. I drove past the old homestead one last time. The land was silent, healing. I didn't feel triumph watching the news of Carolyn's legal downfall. I felt a quiet, profound peace. I took a chunk of that money and donated it, not just to the volunteer fire department, but to a fund helping local farmers get the same kind of comprehensive insurance I had. I wanted good people to have the same shield I'd found. As the first gentle breeze of autumn swept across my new fields, I watched the sun rise, feeling the damp, honest dirt between my fingers. I realized that my most difficult harvest wasn't the corn, but the truth. What you sow in malice, you absolutely, inevitably reap in ruin. Carolyn had tried to destroy me with fire, but she only ended up funding my legacy. So tell me, was what I did right? Taking the insurance money and walking away? Or should I have stayed and rubbed my new wealth in Carolyn's face? Did the $2 million payout represent justice, or simply an escape? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about how true karma works when you're standing on firm ground.